3, 2, 1. All right, so for this week, we're just going to be learning a basic introduction of classes in Java, just like what they are, basic concepts and like important keywords to know in Java. So yeah, for this lesson, we'll just be going over like what is a class, what are fields and methods in classes, things like static versus instance, and then public versus private. Again, like if you have any questions, feel free to just ask in chat or ask in voice if you're comfortable with being recorded. So first off, classes in Java are basically sort of like blueprints to your instances. So think of like instances as objects and classes as like blueprints of telling Java basically what these objects can do and what information they can hold. So basically the reason you want to write your own classes in Java is it really helps keep your code clean. So like you don't have really redundant code that does like that you have to sort of like copy and paste into the main method. Also, classes help you store and manipulate complex data. So also another reason you want to write your own class in Java is class-based. So literally everything in Java is a class, and Java only handles things like objects. So basically, you want to write your own classes to get an understanding of how Java works. This is how you'll be coding in Java, basically. Another thing is class names. I wouldn't say they must be uppercase, but they should be uppercase. Generally, you want your variable names to start with lowercase, and you want your class names to be uppercase. That way, you can distinguish between what's an object and what's a class. So you can basically create custom classes and data fields, or sorry, custom methods and data fields for your classes. And here we just have a demo of what a class is. Like that can hold like data fields, which are basically just like they're just information you can store. So like a field could be like a number of wheels or something. Then you can like basically create sort of have these methods called constructors that can sort of say like they basically create the instance of the class. So basically they'll instantiate all your fields, and you can also like have multiple constructors. And then you basically can go down here, just like during our lesson with how to use objects, you can create an instance of your class by using the new keyword. Any questions about this? Sure.
Yeah. So these words, wheels, num wheels, all of these words in this example, are they data fields or instances, or what do you call all of those things?
Gotcha. So
none of them are objects. I mean, num wheels, until you get down to the bottom one, none of these are objects, right? They're all called something else, like a data field or an instance.
So basically, this entire thing is a class called car. So everything in this bracket over here, from lines 3 to 17, this is like your class. So your class is basically sort of the blueprint to an instance. So this will contain all the information, each instance of your car, like in the main method. For example, car and another car. They will basically hold all the information that's described in the class car. So for data fields, basically num wheels is a data field, and that just means that the car can hold data called num wheels, and this will just describe like the number of wheels a car has. It can also hold things like, these are constructors, which we'll talk about later. But like in general, these will just be what happens when you like create an instance of the car. So what happens is basically we'll assign a value to num wheels. Any questions about this?
So the word num wheel is a data field, and the stuff that you're highlighting there right now is constructing an instance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't worry about it like too much right now because we'll go into it in further detail.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but in general, like this is just a example of what a class can look like, and then how you can sort of create instances of your own class. So next we'll be talking about attributes and methods. So an attribute, I also call it a data field. Lots of people call it different things, and lots of languages will have different terms for this. But attributes are like fields or data fields. They're basically the properties of an object. So basically these are kind of like num wheels where in the example where it's like these are values that the class can hold. So basically you can access the attribute of an object by doing object.attribute. Real life examples would be like if you have a dog, what breed is it, what age is it, what's its name, stuff like that. Or even an example like if we have a car, the number of wheels, the number of doors, and its mileage. Code examples would be like when we were talking about arrays, array.length is an attribute of the array class. And then if you have an object dog, you could do like dog.breed is an attribute of the dog class. Any questions about attributes? Sweet. So the next part of classes is its methods. So methods are just things that this class can do. So for example, when we had ArrayList.size, that was a method. And you can basically call a class method by doing object.method with the parentheses at the end. Real life examples could be like a dog can run, bark, or do other stuff that a dog can do. Or something like for the car, it could be like a car can beep the horn or it can turn and stuff like that. So our code examples would be like if you had when we were talking about string objects, we can do like string object s dot to uppercase. Or if you had like a dog class, you could do like dog.bark with the parentheses at the end. Any questions about this? Sweet. So, well, we can also go further into class methods. And we can talk about sort of how you can write a class method. So I think most of you, or all of what I'll basically do now is sort of like explain what this actually means. So actually, what we could do is let me actually bring up a replet, just an empty replet, and we can sort of explain this main method. So if you open up an empty method, you notice that your main method is actually a class method. So over here, we actually have a class called main, and we have this main method that will run everything, like that will run the replet, or be what like the replet calls when we run it. So we can basically sort of break the main method down by just word for word, just so you understand what it means. So basically for the main method, the first two, public static, these are scope identifiers. And don't worry about what they mean right now because we'll explain it to you later. But they basically sort of, for now, we'll just say they talk about like what the visibility of this method is. The next is the return type. So the next thing you should have in your class method is your return type, which will basically be like, what value does this method return? For the main method right now, it'll return nothing. So that's the void keyword. You'll just type in void if you don't want your class method to return anything. Next is the method name. You have your two parentheses. And then finally, we have your parameter types or your parameter list inside the parentheses. So the main method will take in a string array called args. And then inside the curly brackets, you'll do what, like, that'll be whatever you want to run in the method. Any questions about this?
I have a question.
Sure.
So instead of saying string, can we say int or bool or double or something?
So for like specifically for the main method, you can't, because once you get into like more complex programs, the main method requires you to take in a string array of arguments. But if you make your own like class method, so like if we have like a class called student or something, if you make your own class methods in there, you can add in anything you want. So like,
Okay.
yeah. So in your own methods, you can have like you can have your method taken bools or ints or whatever. But specifically for this main method, it has to like be all of this.
Examples are slightly different syntactically.
Oh, gotcha. It doesn't really make a difference. So for an array, you can instantiate an array by doing like int x equals like whatever array, or you can instantiate as int x with the brackets afterwards. So both of these are valid. A sort of special method where it doesn't really follow the rules or guidelines that I talked about over here. Like it doesn't have any of these keywords in front of it. So first, it must have the same name as the class. So unlike other methods where you'll want to keep the method name lowercase, this one has to like have the exact same name of the class. So for example, over here we have a class called student results. Over here we'll have the constructor, which is also literally just student results with the parentheses behind it, and then the curly brackets. And then inside the curly brackets, you'll basically instantiate all of your data fields that you have up here. So full name, exam score, and exam grade, they'll be all given values inside of the constructor. And also the constructor has no return type. The other two methods are just like general terms for methods that you might want to consider creating. So the first one is getters. So these literally just return the value of whatever field you want to access. And the second one is setters, which will help you change class fields. These don't exactly have rules, and they aren't exactly special methods, I would say, but these are just general terms for the types of methods you can create. And then again, we have another demo. And then as we load, okay, there we go. While we're loading this up, does anyone have questions about getters, setters, or constructors?
Maybe when you show the demo.
All right, so I've posted the demo link in chat. So over here, we have like, or you have to have it so that it's like literally the class name with parentheses afterwards. For constructors, they can actually take in parameters. So over here for dog, I've basically had the constructor take in like an integer and 2 strings so that I can basically set the value of age, name, and sound. So it's not all the time over like in the example in the PowerPoint where you don't have any parameters. For constructors, you can actually have like different parameters for it. Next is a setter. So this is basically just a general term for a method where you just change the value of a data field. So for over here for setter set age, you take in like a parameter called new age, and you literally just set the data field age to a new value. Getter is you just get the value. So this will just return like this .name. So yeah, this will just get you the value of the field that you want. Same thing for get age. This is just another getter. And then this is just a regular class method. So yeah, and then you can just call like the getters and setters just like any other methods. Dog, again, like when we have technically like this is calling the dog constructor. So having the new dog with all the parameters passed in, this will call the constructor over here and perform all the things inside the brackets.
Well, that's saved in the dog object. Does that make sense? And if you want to change what's in the dog object, you would use a setter method, right? And so if you were to have things like print, system.out.println in the bark method in the dog class, it literally does just that. It prints it out, but you can't necessarily print out the sound of the dog from your main class if it isn't a public variable. So you kind of have to use some of the getter methods, and it's good practice too. So if that clears it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully this will make a little bit more sense, like once we start talking, like once we like get further into like static versus instance and like public versus private, hopefully. But yeah, class. So in our previous example, we had like age, name, and sound. Those were all class fields. Another example is like a car class could store like the number of wheels, the top speed, number of doors. And you can access an instances field through the this keyword. Christian made a good point that you definitely like don't have to use it like this.name or this.age. You don't have to use this to refer to an instances field. Personally, I would say you should, just because it's a little easier to distinguish what is like part of the instance and what isn't. Sometimes what happens is like a lot of programmers, or even I do this honestly, like we'll do something like in an instance or like in a method, and we'll just pass in like another variable called age, or that has the same name as an instance variable. And what happens is like you can get these confused a little bit, especially without like syntax highlighting. But yeah. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about static versus instance. So static is, I would say, like, think about Java or like classes in two kinds of ways. So first is like variables specifically belong to the class level, which is this field or method can be called by the class, or the data is shared by the entire, like all instances across the class. The other one is the instance level, which is the object level. So this is sort of the field or method belongs to the instance, or like the object, instance of an object, or an object that's an instance of the class. So that example, this will be a little bit more clear once we get into a demo. And finally, we have another level, which is just local, and it's basically this variable belongs or can only be accessed in the current method. So outside the method's curly brackets, you can't, basically that variable doesn't exist. So again, static fields stay the same across all instances of the class. All right, so I'm gonna copy this over. Public static void main string args. So basically the main method is a class method basically. And then if you don't have the static keyword, the variable will, or the method will automatic, or sorry, the method or field will automatically be an instance method or field. So over here, total dog count is a static variable, while dog count is just an instance variable. And inside
does static variable mean that it will always be 0, or does it mean something else?
Not exactly. So don't think of static in sort of the English definition. The sort of the programmer or the Java definition is that it's elevated to like the class level. So it won't always be 0, but it will always be the same between all instances of dog. So basically inside the dog constructor, we'll increment total dog count, and we'll also increment the instance variable dog count. So this dog count. And notice that that for total dog count, I didn't use the this dot, but for the instance one, I did. So again, like you can't use this dot. You can't say this dot total dog count because that field is no longer part of the instance level. It's basically sort of elevated to a class level. So you can no longer access it through like the instance using this. So, and then in the main method, I'll basically create two new dog objects. So Fluffington and Whiskers, and I'll try to print out both like their dog counts and their total dog counts, and let's see what happens. So for Fluffington and Whiskers.dog count, these both printed 1s. So basically, when I instantiated them, it just incremented this dog count, and because this dog count isn't shared between all instances of the class, it'll only be 1 for each of them. However, total dog count is shared between all instances of the dog class, so it'll be incremented to 2. Any questions about this? Sweet. All right, and the final thing we're going to talk about is public versus private. So this just defines the visibility that I want you guys to keep in mind is public and private. So public is the method where field can be seen and accessed by any other class. And then private means it can only be seen and accessed within the class itself. There's also like a middle ground called protected, where it's like it can be seen and accessed by subclasses or other classes in the same package. Don't worry about too much. That's more of a complex like form of visibility. Before we get onto a demo, I just want to talk about what's the default visibility, because the default visibility, if you don't add a public or private keyword before the variable, is a little bit mixed. So basically for that, Java calls it package private, which means it can only be accessed by the class and classes within the same package, but not any like subclasses or like everything else. The best practice for visibility is you want to keep everything as private as possible. So basically, you don't want things outside your class accidentally accessing methods or fields that you don't want them necessarily to be changing by accident. Over here, I just have a diagram that you can sort of look over. This just tells you sort of who can see the methods or fields in your class, depending on what modifier you add before the variable or method. So as I'm loading this, any questions about visibility? All right. So I'm just gonna copy this or pass in their own name, but the age will always be 3. So down here, we'll basically instantiate a new dog called dog with the name Fido. We'll basically print out the dog's name by directly accessing it. So through dog.name. And then we can also change the dog's name by directly accessing it. Generally for public for public fields, you can basically directly access it and also change it by directly calling like the class field. And then we'll print it out again. So basically, we'll be able to change the dog's name by doing this. However, like if I try to do the same with the dog's age, we'll run into a little bit of an issue because Java will realize that the age is private and we're not supposed to be able to change the age or even like see what the value is of it before or outside of that class. So if you notice in our, let me actually open up the getter and setter demo. And you'll notice that in this demo, we've actually set all the class fields to private. And again, the reason you want to sort of lean towards getters and setters instead of making everything public is you don't want to accidentally be changing fields or you don't want to accidentally be changing the values of your classes or of your instances data by like in a separate part of your code. So this will setting everything to private and sort of hiding things behind setters and getters will make it so that you aren't sort of messing with the data, your data, like, or you aren't changing your data without realizing it. Basically making a class on your own, and you'll be sort of testing the class methods by calling it or by instantiating it and calling it yourself in the main method. So you can submit either one of these and we'll sort of check it out. I would recommend you, like, even if you're doing the harder one, you should also check out the easier one just to make sure, like, you first off, like, you know how to call like a class, and also you can also check out like the class itself and sort of use it as inspiration to make your own class. So I'll copy both of these into chat. And while I do that, do you guys have any other questions about classes or anything else we've talked about?